All right, let's jump right in. Today on the YouTube channel, we're diving into a full explainer covering this entire, absolutely fascinating research report. It synthesizes the psychological, sociological, and spiritual dynamics behind why humanity resists inner transformation so much. Look, if you've ever poured your heart into studying the mysteries of consciousness, decoding ancient texts, or just really trying to wake up, you already know the path is rarely a walk in the park. But we aren't just talking about the internal struggle today, we're talking about the external pushback. We're going to unpack the mechanics behind why deep inner work is so rarely embraced by the masses, and why it provokes such intense reactions.
So, why does seeking the truth trigger so much hostility? It's a question almost everyone on this path eventually has to ask, right? You do the deep, independent research, you cross-reference the traditions, you sit with the contradictions, and then you finally bring your synthesized findings to someone else. But instead of being met with curiosity, instead of them asking, "Whoa, what did you read? How did you figure this out?" you're met with outright hostility. If you've experienced this, well, this explainer is going to validate exactly why you're facing that intense resistance. Trust me, it's not a coincidence, and it's definitely not just you.
So let's get into section 1, the root of the problem. Why inner work triggers hostility. To really understand this, we have to look at the ego. Now, the ego isn't just your personality or some pop psychology buzzword, it is a literal biological defense system. Think of it as a structural survival operating system built by trauma and socialization, and it's heavily, heavily invested in its own continuity and threat neutralization. It isn't evil, but its main job is to keep you safe. So when you introduce profound spiritual inquiry to someone, it doesn't just sound like a fun new idea to them, it registers physiologically to their ego as a life or death emergency. Mystics across literally every tradition frame awakening as a death, whether it's the Sufi concept of fana, the Christian idea of kenosis, or the Buddhist anatman. Something has to die, and the ego knows this. Its primary job is neutralizing that threat. And this brilliantly illustrates exactly how that threat neutralization plays out. Look at the comparison here. When someone's belief system is tied to their cultural belonging and identity, challenging it produces massive cognitive dissonance. Leon Festinger's research actually showed that people don't abandon beliefs under pressure, they double down. Why? Because completely updating a core belief system is neurologically expensive. It requires breaking habituated neural patterns that normally reward the brain with dopamine. The amygdala literally cannot distinguish between a physical threat and a threat to a worldview. So what's the alternative? Well, attacking the messenger, dismissing them as arrogant or crazy, is neurologically cheap. If they can label you as crazy, the threat is neutralized, and they don't have to do the heavy lifting of restructuring their own mind. Moving on to Section 2, the Independent Researcher Blueprint, a historical precedent. Check out this quote. "Isn't this the carpenter's son? Isn't his mother's name Mary?" That's Matthew 13:55. Notice the tension here between deep independent research and institutional conditioning. This is an ancient structural pattern, guys. If we look sociologically at Jesus as an independent researcher, we see a fascinating parallel. At age 12, he wasn't just passively listening in the temple, he was cross-disciplinarily engaging with the living tradition. And the crowd's response later? "Isn't this the carpenter's son?" They totally dismissed him. The established institution felt threatened not primarily by his theology, but by his lack of traditional institutional credentials. They didn't like that he didn't come through their approved seminary pathway. You see, the institution is often trusted simply because it's familiar, not because it produces better work. But here's the kicker. The ancient texts themselves actually mandate independent research. This brings us to what the report calls the Berean standard. This is the practice of independently cross-checking primary sources to verify truths, explicitly commended over passive institutional deference. In Acts 17:11, the Bereans are called more noble, exactly because they didn't just blindly accept teachings. They went to the primary sources and cross-checked them every single day. Plus, 2 Timothy 2:15 commands us to study and rightly divide the word of truth, which means diligent exegesis, understanding context and original languages. Real humility and faithfulness actually demand rigorous primary source investigation. Blindly accepting whatever an institution says isn't faithfulness, it's intellectual abdication, just dressed up as humility. All right, Section 3, the cosmic scale, the 144K consciousness threshold. Let's see how this builds from individual psychological resistance to a massive mathematical limit. Take the number 8 to 9,000, which is roughly the square root of 1% of the global population. Back in the 1970s, Maharishi Mahesh Yogi proposed something called the Maharishi effect.
He suggested that if just the specific number of people practice deep, synchronized meditation, you'd see measurable reductions in social stress, like crime and conflict, in that region. And get this, peer-reviewed studies in the Journal of Conflict Resolution have actually found statistically significant correlations backing this up. It tells us that consciousness might not be entirely private. It actually has field effects.
And this scales up to a number you might recognize, 144,000. It's a symbolic and mathematical threshold representing the critical density of awakened minds required to shift the collective unconscious field. Whether you look at Revelation, Kabbalistic numerology, or indigenous prophetic traditions, this exact number appears independently over and over again. Numerologically, 12 times 12 represents structural completion, multiplied by 1,000 for cosmic scale. Whether you view it through the spread of cultural ideas in mimetic theory or the idea of an interconnected biological memory through morphogenetic fields, 144K acts as this ultimate tipping point. It's the critical density needed for an information cascade across our entire planetary system.
Next up is Section 4, Evidence of a Global Shift. The Data Speaks. You might be wondering if this is actually happening right now. Well, this data table pulls together massive, peer-reviewed spikes across completely different disciplines. First, we have the psychedelic renaissance at institutions like Johns Hopkins and NYU, documenting exponential growth in verified mystical experiences of ego dissolution. Second, Pew Research shows the spiritual but not religious demographic is absolutely surging. It's the fastest-growing Western demographic. People aren't abandoning the transcendent, they're just ditching the institutional containers that no longer hold it. And third, Princeton's Global Consciousness Project has shown that collective human attention creates measurable physical deviations in randomness. This convergence is wild. It proves the cultural and psychological conditions for a mass awakening are currently more favorable than ever in recorded history. But this brings up a massive paradox. The spirit is broadcasting universally, but most cannot hear it because the noise floor of ego armor and institutional conditioning is simply too high. If the signal is everywhere, why does the ancient text in Matthew say, "Narrow is the gate and few find it"? Well, it's not because of some exclusive club membership. It's a paradox of signal theory. The signal for awakening is literally everywhere, pouring out on all people. But most people just can't hear it because the noise floor of their ego armor, their fear of uncertainty, and their institutional conditioning is drowning it out. They haven't done the deep deconstruction work necessary to calibrate their receiver. So what do we do about it? Let's look at Section 5, How to Navigate the Path, Actionable Wisdom for the Awakened. Facing all this data and history, here is exactly how you can navigate daily life against that wall of hostility. Step 1. Stop trying to convert. Seriously. Jesus spoke in parables to let those with ears hear. Plant seeds, use specific language, and ask questions instead of forcing conclusions. You can't force a threshold someone hasn't reached. Step 2. Document everything. Your timestamp synthesis belongs to a lineage of transmission for future readers. The 13th century mystics wrote for you, and you are writing for a future reader you can't even see yet. And step 3. Calibrate your audience. Compassionately match the depth of your research to the readiness of the vessel. Don't hand a 40-page research synthesis to an ego that isn't ready. It just gives them material to attack you with. Match the depth of your offering to where they are at. As you do this, there's one fundamental reality you have to grasp. Profound isolation is a transitional feature of early awakening, not a permanent bug. The loneliness you feel, operating completely beyond the conversational range of your peers. It is a legitimate, well-documented state across almost every mystical tradition. It is just a transitional period. Your true tribe will find you when you are ready to be found, and when they are ready to find you. Operating from alignment rather than seeking approval is absolutely crucial here. Remember, the resistance you face isn't a sign you are wrong. It's a sign your truth is threatening an incorrect system. And correct systems radiate. So I'll leave you with this final thought. At what critical density of awakened minds will the collective unconscious reorganize? And are you the node that pushes us over the threshold? You might never personally see the tipping point, but your relentless, independent work is radiating coherence into the global field. So keep doing the work.